All right, brother. Let's get into something most men don't talk about, at least not out loud. You've probably been told to be the provider, the protector, the man with a plan. And sure, all of that matters. But the truth is, what gets her attention isn't always what keeps her emotionally hooked. It's not just strength, charm, or looks. It's something deeper, something quieter, something she won't even admit to herself. While women are often seen as emotionally complex, there are hidden triggers, weaknesses, really, that most men completely overlook. And when you miss them, you chase when you should hold still. You explain when you should stay silent. You give when you should pull back. And she pulls away, not because you weren't enough, but because you gave too much of the wrong thing. But when you learn to move differently, when you stop reacting and start observing, when you stop proving and start embodying, that's when the shift happens. That's when she starts feeling something she can't explain. That's when you become the man who no longer has to chase, because you've become the standard. In this video, we're going to break down 7 of the most overlooked psychological switches in a woman's mind. These are not surface-level tricks. They're deep emotional patterns. And when you understand them, you stop guessing. You stop negotiating. You start leading with quiet power that speaks louder than any pickup line ever could. So if you've ever felt like you were doing everything right but still getting left on red, if you've ever watched her lose interest the moment you started, caring more, or if you've ever wondered why some men barely try but still leave a lasting mark, this is your wake-up call. Let's get into it. Number 1. The one emotion she tries to hide but can't around you. She'll laugh, she'll brush it off, she'll act like she's unaffected. But there's one emotion most women feel around a certain kind of man, and no matter how calm, confident, or controlled she appears, she can't hide it. It's uncertainty. Not confusion, not chaos. I'm talking about that internal shift she feels when you walk into a room, speak with intention, and don't try to prove a single thing about yourself. When she looks at you and realizes she can't read you, she doesn't know exactly where she stands. And that right there is what creates the emotional current she can't escape. See, most men are too obvious. They wear everything on their sleeves. They compliment too soon. They text too fast. They need to be liked before they're even respected. And because of that, women read them in minutes. They know exactly what's coming. No tension, no mystery, no polarity. But the man who's calm in his presence, who doesn't rush, doesn't chase, doesn't over-explain, he creates a feeling she can't fully name. It's not fear, it's not insecurity. It's that subtle, nagging question in the back of her mind. Why do I want to know what he's thinking? That's the beginning of emotional tension. And here's the truth. She tries to hide it. She'll distract herself, scroll, talk fast, change the subject. But her body tells on her. She leans in more than usual. She watches your reactions. She slows down without realizing it, because now you've disrupted her emotional autopilot. You've made her feel something she didn't plan to feel. And for women who are used to being in control of the conversation, the mood, the dynamic, that emotion catches them off guard. That's why she hides it. Not because she's manipulating, but because for the first time in a long time, she's not driving the experience. And let me be clear, this doesn't come from being mean or withholding or playing games. It comes from knowing that you don't need to entertain, impress, or chase to create connection. You just need to be rooted. When a man is rooted, when his energy doesn't spike with praise or shrink with rejection, a woman has no choice but to feel herself in his presence. That's the shift. That's the one emotion she can't hide. Because here's what no one told you. Most women don't fall for what they see in a man. They fall for how they feel about themselves when they're around him. And when your energy is calm, consistent, centered, she feels unsettled in the best way. She starts asking, why do I want more of him, even though you haven't done anything loud, even though you haven't revealed your cards, even though you haven't said more than a few words? Because power doesn't always speak. Sometimes it just is, and when it's real, she feels it. Now let's bring in a bit of Stoicism here. Seneca said, the greatest power is often simple presence. He wasn't talking about force, he was talking about being calm, undistracted, unmoved. And that's exactly the kind of presence that brings out the emotion she tries to suppress. Not because you're triggering insecurity, but because you're offering something she doesn't often see. A man who's clear but not eager, present but not pressing, open but not performing. That's what makes her wonder. That's what shifts her energy. That's what makes her react to you internally, even when she's silent externally. So if you've ever had a moment where you noticed her behavior shift, where she got a little quieter, a little slower, maybe even a little thrown off by your stillness, you saw it. That emotion she couldn't hide. It wasn't about your words, it was about your state. And if you're stepping into that state now, not trying to be mysterious, but just refusing to be reactive, drop this in the comments. I own the silence, because the man who no longer needs to prove himself is the one who reveals everything without saying a word. Number 2, why emotional presence is her silent obsession. It's not your looks, it's not your job, it's not your charm, your car, or how many books you've read. What gets under her skin, what she can't stop noticing, even when she tries to ignore it, is your emotional presence. Most men think attraction is built on talking, on action, on showing effort. But the truth is, a woman feels your presence before she ever hears your voice. And when your energy says, "I'm here, I'm grounded, and I'm not trying to prove anything," it speaks louder than any words could. See, women live in the emotional realm. They're constantly scanning for signals. Your posture, your tone, your reactions, your stillness, they're tuned in to the subtle. And the man who is fully present, undistracted, unfazed, aware, becomes magnetic without needing to say a thing. Because emotional presence isn't about intensity. It's not about staring into her soul or trying to be deep. It's about being fully here, not pulled into your head, not performing, just present. And you'd be surprised how rare that is. Most guys aren't really there. They're anticipating. They're reacting, they're planning what to say next, they're scanning for her approval. And women can feel that, even if you think you're hiding it. But a man who doesn't flinch when she gets emotional, who doesn't chase her mood, who isn't uncomfortable with silence, that man feels like a rock in the middle of chaos. And that rock, whether she admits it or not, is exactly what she wants to lean against. Here's why. When you're emotionally present, she feels seen without having to perform. She doesn't need to act a certain way to get your attention. She doesn't have to guess what version of you is going to show up, because your energy is steady, unshaken. And that steadiness, that calm, makes her feel safe. Not protected in the physical sense, but safe to be feminine, safe to soften, safe to stop trying to control every moment. That's when her guard drops. That's when her voice slows. That's when she starts reacting to you with respect instead of resistance. Because when you're emotionally present, you're not needy. You're not there to be validated. You're there because you choose to be, not because you need to be. And that shifts everything. Now, you're not just a man she talks to. You're a space she enters, a rhythm she tunes into, an energy she keeps coming back to even if she doesn't know why. Let's go even deeper. Presence means you're no longer thinking about outcome. You're no longer worried about what she'll think. You're not reacting to her emotions. You're just aware of them. And in that awareness, you become her emotional mirror, not her emotional puppet. She feels safe not because you told her to, but because you didn't crumble when she got cold. You didn't chase when she pulled away. You didn't try to fill the silence. You let her be and you stayed being. That contrast is powerful because most men either overstep or withdraw. They try too hard to connect or they ghost completely. But emotional presence sits in the middle. It watches without tension. It listens without jumping in. It holds the moment no matter how heavy it gets. And women, they become obsessed with that because it's rare, because it's real, because in a world full of men trying to get something, you're the man who's already full. And when you're full, you're not chasing love, you're extending stability. Let's bring it back to Stoicism. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Presence is listening not just to her words, but to her energy. And when she realizes you see her without losing yourself in her, she doesn't forget it. So, if you're learning to stop reacting, to slow your pace, to let her come to you while you stay rooted in who you are, type this in the comments. I choose presence, because the man who doesn't need to chase her emotions is the one who pulls her in without ever raising his voice. Number 3. How your absence triggers her need for validation. Let me ask you something. Have you ever gone silent, not out of spite, not to play games, but just to protect your peace, and suddenly she starts reaching out again. That's not random, that's not coincidence, that's the power of absence. See, when you're always available, always explaining, always checking in, you become predictable. And predictability for most women slowly kills curiosity. But the moment you pull back, genuinely, not performatively, her brain starts to work overtime. She doesn't know where you are emotionally. She doesn't know what you're thinking. She doesn't know if she still holds your attention. And that lack of certainty, that's what flips the switch. Suddenly, your silence becomes louder than any message. And whether she admits it or not, she starts craving an answer to a question she didn't even know she was asking. Am I still important to him? That's the moment where your absence doesn't just register, it echoes. But here's what most men get wrong. They think pulling back is about making her chase. They try to create distance as a tactic. They act cold, hoping it'll get her attention. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the kind of absence that comes from a man who's finally centered, who's no longer performing, who's not trying to fix what wasn't broken, a man who walks away not to provoke her, but to return to himself. That absence, that clean break from neediness, from over-explaining, from emotional pursuit, that's what causes the real shift in her, because now she becomes the one unsure. She starts wondering if you still care. And ironically, that uncertainty makes her reflect on your value in a way your presence never could. Here's why. When you were constantly available, she had a mirror in front of her, but she wasn't really looking into it. She was too busy reacting, testing, assuming you'd always be there. But when the mirror disappears, when the reflection is gone, she starts asking the deeper questions. And that's when she starts scrolling through your old messages. That's when she lingers on your stories, just long enough for you to notice. That's when the accidental texts appear, or the casual likes, or the questions that sound harmless, but are really just checking your emotional temperature. Because here's the truth. Most women won't admit they don't just want your attention. They want to know they still have influence over you. And when you stop giving them that feedback loop, they reach to get it back. This is when her need for validation kicks in. Not because she's shallow, not because she's manipulative, but because she's human, and your absence broke the rhythm she got comfortable dancing to. And that's where your power is. Not in punishing her, not in ignoring her, out of ego, but in realizing that sometimes silence teaches louder than words ever could. Let's ground this in Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Your absence isn't about controlling her behavior. It's about refusing to abandon your peace just to hold on to someone who hasn't earned it. And when you finally choose that, she feels it. She may not like it, but she respects it because you're not trying to be mysterious. You've just stopped giving your energy away to see if you still matter. And ironically, that's what makes her wonder. So if you've reached the point where you're no longer trying to explain your value, no longer chasing clarity from someone who couldn't meet you in presence, drop this in the comments. I choose distance, because the man who walks away without needing attention is the one she watches more closely than ever before. Number 4. The masculine calm that makes her collapse emotionally. She can raise her voice. She can roll her eyes. She can challenge you with words that bite or retreat into silence that dares you to chase. But when you meet all of that with one thing, masculine calm, something inside her begins to collapse. Not in defeat, not in weakness, but in surrender. Because here's the truth she won't say out loud. Most women are used to leading emotional tension. They're used to being the emotional thermostat. They escalate, they withdraw, they control the rhythm of the exchange. And most men, they follow. They match her energy. They react, defend, explain, or lose composure, trying to win her back into softness. But the man who doesn't rise to that chaos, who doesn't need to prove anything in the heat of emotion, who stays grounded when the conversation feels unstable, that man breaks her pattern completely. Because now she doesn't know what to do with your stillness. She doesn't know how to rattle you. She doesn't know how to steer the conversation where she's emotionally in charge. And in that confusion, she softens. What you're showing her is rare. You're not just a man who listens. You're a man who doesn't need her mood to validate his frame. You can handle the fire without losing your center. And that makes her feel something deeper than attraction. It makes her feel safe. Not in the surface way, but in the way that lets her take off the armor. Because here's what most men don't understand. A woman doesn't open up to loud confidence. She opens up to quiet certainty. She lets go around the man who doesn't get pulled into her storms. She collapses not because you broke her down, but because your calm gave her permission to stop trying so hard to stay guarded. And let's be clear, this isn't passive. You're not cold. You're not disconnected. You're simply unavailable for emotional chaos. You don't shut down, you just refuse to give your energy to anything that pulls you out of integrity. And that calm, that self-control, that lack of emotional neediness, that's what shifts her from defense to desire. Because now you're not playing the same game. You're not trying to fix her emotions. You're not begging for her to understand you. You're standing still, grounded in your values, rooted in your peace, and she feels it. Let's put this in real terms. She might come at you with heat. She might test your tone, your limits, your silence. And when you don't react, when you pause before you speak, when you lower your voice instead of raise it, that contrast jolts her nervous system in a way she didn't expect. And she remembers it, because now you're no longer just a man. You're a presence. You're a space, you're a mirror that doesn't move. And when a woman meets a mirror that doesn't move, she begins to see herself. She begins to trust the stillness. And that trust turns into surrender. Now, let's anchor this in Stoicism. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Your calm is a form of power, not because it silences her, but because it silences you first. It keeps you from acting out of fear, pride, or insecurity. And when she sees that you don't flinch, when you stay in control of your emotional energy no matter what storm she throws, she starts feeling something she can't intellectualize: respect, safety, a pull toward you that's no longer based on attraction, but on surrender. So if you're done reacting to chaos, done raising your voice, done trying to win her attention by losing your center, type this in the comments. I lead with calm, because the man who doesn't rise to emotional war wins by never entering the battlefield at all. Number 5. When she feels you don't need her, she leans in. Let's be honest, brother. Most men were raised to believe that the more you give, the more she'll stay. That if you prove your loyalty, show your devotion, and make her the center of your world, she'll finally see your value. But here's what really happens. The moment she senses you need her more than she needs you, the dynamic flips, and not in your favor. Neediness repels. It puts pressure on her. It makes her feel responsible for your emotional balance. And deep down, that's not what she's drawn to. She doesn't want to be your reason for peace. She wants to feel attracted to your peace without her. When a woman feels you're emotionally dependent on her, something subtle breaks. Not because she's heartless, but because the weight of being your source isn't romantic. It's exhausting. It feels like pressure disguised as affection. But when she feels that you don't need her, not in a cold, detached, dismissive way, but in a deeply grounded, I'm complete either way energy, something shifts inside her. She starts leaning in, because now your attention feels like a gift, not a grasp. Your time feels chosen, not owed. And your presence, it becomes valuable because it's no longer guaranteed. You see, people chase what they can't quite secure. And when you stop signaling that you're emotionally available at all times, when you stop trying to fill silence with reassurance, when you stop needing her reactions to validate your worth, you become the mystery she wants to solve again. That's the paradox. The less you need her, the more she starts thinking about you, not because you're playing games, but because your self-sufficiency becomes magnetic. Here's the deeper truth most men miss. Women don't want to be your everything. They want to feel like they've earned a place in a life that's already full. And when you stop making her your emotional project, when you stop seeking her for completion, when you're simply living your life with or without her, that's when she starts wondering, why is he okay without me? Why do I want back in when he's not asking me to stay? Why does his distance feel heavier than my presence? That's when the leaning begins. She starts responding quicker. She pays closer attention. She tries harder but subtly, not with words, but with energy, with softness, with initiative, with a pull she can't quite explain. And here's the key. This only works when it's authentic. You're not faking detachment. You're not pretending to be busy. You're actually centered in your purpose. You've got your own life. You've got places to be. You're emotionally full with or without her. That's what makes your attention powerful again, not because you withhold it, but because it's no longer cheap. Let's bring in Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. You don't need her to complete you. You're not waiting for her to approve of your worth. You already have it. And that's why she starts wanting back into the space you no longer offer, freely. She doesn't lean in because you ignore her. She leans in because you no longer orbit around her. You're the sun now. You radiate with or without her presence. And she feels that shift more deeply than any compliment or message ever could. So, if you're done trying to prove your value, if you're done showing her you care by overgiving, if you're choosing your peace, your presence, your purpose over chasing validation, drop this in the comments. I need nothing, because the man who's complete without her is the one she fights hardest not to lose. Number 6, the quiet power of being unavailable at the right time. Let's talk about timing, not in terms of when to call or when to text back, but something far more powerful. The strategic stillness, the well-timed absence, the quiet power of being unavailable at the right time. See, most guys think consistency means always being there, always replying, always showing up, always saying yes. And while consistency matters, availability without boundaries breeds indifference. When she knows she can reach you anytime, anywhere, under any condition, you stop being a presence. You start becoming a background feature. And women don't crave what they can predict. They crave what they feel, and timing plays a massive role in emotional impact. Now here's where it gets real. It's not about ignoring her. It's not about disappearing to get attention. It's about recognizing that your availability loses value when it's always assumed. You could have the most attractive energy in the world, but if you give it away every time she blinks, she won't feel it anymore. But when you learn the art of intentional unavailability, something shifts. She starts noticing the space. She starts paying attention to when you're there and when you're not. And in that contrast, your presence becomes memorable again. Let me give you an example. Let's say she's used to you responding in minutes. One day you don't. Not because you're punishing her, but because you're in your life, focused, moving, grounded. And she feels it. Not just the silence, but the lack of pursuit behind it. She doesn't get a, "Hey, sorry, just saw this." She doesn't get a play-by-play of your day. She gets space, stillness, ambiguity. And in that gap, her thoughts spiral, not in panic, but in curiosity. Why hasn't he replied? Is he pulling away? Did I say something? She'll scan her last message. She'll check your social. She'll replay your tone in her mind. And all of that isn't about control. It's about mystery born from restraint, because emotional power isn't loud. It doesn't beg. It doesn't demand. It lets silence do the work. And the man who understands that, he doesn't have to withdraw permanently. He just knows when not to show up, especially after tension, especially when things feel one-sided, especially when her energy is entitled. You don't need to fight back. You don't need to explain. You just need to exit the moment without noise. That exit, that absence, that break in rhythm, it resets everything. It reminds her that you don't belong to her emotions. It reminds her that your time is a choice, not an obligation. It reminds her that you have a life that doesn't wait for validation. And that's where attraction gets reborn. Because now you're not just a man who's there. You're a man whose presence means something because it's earned. Let's anchor this in Stoicism. Seneca wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." If you're always available, always accessible, always responsive, you start losing impact. But when you learn to be selective, to be purposeful, to be unavailable without guilt, you send a message without saying a word. I respect my time more than I fear your reaction. And that, my friend, is felt on a deep emotional level. She won't say it, but she'll shift. She'll show up softer. She'll pay closer attention, not because you told her to, but because your timing taught her. So if you're done being the man who's always just one call away, if you're learning to protect your energy, to pause before reacting, to create space on purpose, drop this in the comments. I honor my time because the man who disappears with intention always returns with more value than when he left. Number 7. Why your self-respect is her favorite form of attraction. There's something about a man who respects himself that hits different. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's not in what he says, it's in what he refuses to tolerate. See, most men are taught to be agreeable. Say the right thing, keep her happy, don't rock the boat. But here's what happens when you live that way too long. She stops respecting you, even if she still likes you. Because deep down, a woman isn't attracted to a man who always agrees. She's attracted to the man who has a line and keeps it. And that line, that boundary, that refusal to betray yourself just to win her over, that's what she remembers. That's what she feels. That's what makes her pause and wonder, who is this guy that I can't manipulate? Let me put it plainly. Self-respect isn't about ego. It's not about arrogance. It's about value. The value you place on your time, the value you place on your peace, the value you place on your energy. When she feels that, truly feels it, everything changes because now you're not afraid to walk away. You're not afraid to say no. You're not afraid to be misunderstood if it means staying aligned with who you are. And that kind of man, he doesn't chase, he doesn't beg, he doesn't compromise his standards for attention. That's rare, and that rarity is magnetic. Here's where it goes deeper. Most men think attraction is about performance. Be interesting, be funny, be successful. But when all of that comes from a place of wanting to be chosen, it becomes performative. It lacks depth. But when your actions come from self-respect, when you no longer bend just to be accepted, you become attractive without even trying. That's when she notices your silence. That's when she respects your boundaries. That's when she starts second-guessing her own behavior around you. Not because you punished her, not because you guilted her, but because your self-respect made her realize you're not just any man. You're not playing her game, you're playing yours. And that game, it's built on peace, on integrity, on not needing to be understood to remain powerful. So what does this look like in real life? It looks like walking away when she disrespects you without warning her first. It looks like not texting back when the energy is off, not out of ego, but out of clarity. It looks like saying, I'm not okay with that, and not explaining why 6 different ways. And here's the paradox. The more you respect yourself, the more she starts questioning how she's treating you. The more you enforce your standard, the more she wants to meet it. The more you choose yourself, the more she feels drawn back in. Because that's the kind of man she can't predict. That's the kind of man she can't control. And that's the kind of man she can't help but admire, even when she pretends otherwise. Let's bring in Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's the code. Don't explain your worth. Don't defend your boundaries. Just be the man who honors himself, even when it costs you the connection. Because here's the thing. When you're willing to lose her rather than lose yourself, she feels it. And even if she leaves, she remembers. She may not say it, but deep down she'll carry the impression of the man who stood his ground. Not because he was stubborn, but because he was sovereign. So if you're done over-explaining, over-giving, and overreaching just to keep someone close, if you're ready to start letting your standards speak louder than your words, drop this in the by. Comments. I choose myself. Because the man who respects himself is the one she respects most, even if it takes losing her to see it. He doesn't try to fit into her world because he's too busy building his own. He's not here to chase attention, he's here to attract alignment. That shift changes everything because now she has to rise to meet you. Now she starts to wonder if she's enough for you, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you've stopped performing for people who haven't earned your truth. This is where real confidence begins. Not in loud bravado, not in perfect words, but in the quiet understanding that your life is full with or without her choosing it. Let me be clear, this isn't about indifference, it's about intentionality. You're not rejecting connection, you're filtering for value. You're not closing off emotionally, you're opening up only where it's safe, respected, and mutual. And ironically, when you live this way, when you carry yourself like a man who doesn't need to be picked, you become impossible to forget. Because now you're not an option. You're the metric. The way you speak, the way you hold eye contact, the way you say no without flinching, the way you smile without needing a reaction, it all speaks to one core truth. You are no longer here to prove anything. You are here to embody everything you once thought you had to earn. Let's bring this home with some Stoicism. Epictetus said, "Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly." That's what this is. You've stopped bending, you've stopped reaching, you've stopped trying to become the version of yourself she might want. And now you are the version of yourself that only you require. A man who sets the tone. A man who defines the standard. A man who doesn't need to be chosen because he's already chosen himself. So if you felt that shift, if you're done playing the game of approval and ready to walk as the one they remember, not the one who waits, then carry this mantra with you. I am the standard. Not because you said it loud, but because you lived it quietly. And that silence speaks more than trying ever could. All right, brother, if you've made it this far, that already says something about you. It tells me you're not here just to get tips or play tactics. You're here because deep down you're tired of shrinking, tired of waiting to be enough, tired of trying to fit into frames that were never built for your strength. You're here because you're ready to shift. From chasing to choosing, from proving to knowing, from being an option to being the one she remembers. Everything we talked about today, it's not about controlling women. It's not about becoming emotionally unavailable or manipulative. It's about reclaiming your power, the quiet, calm, unwavering power that comes from living with standards and sticking to them. That's what Stoicism teaches, not detachment from emotion, but discipline within it. Not being cold, but being clear. Not being heartless, but being whole with or without her. So if today's video gave you clarity, if it reminded you of who the hell you are, then do this for yourself. Subscribe to the channel not just for more content, but to stay connected to this mindset, this energy, this brotherhood of men who refuse to settle. And if something hit deep, type it out. Don't just watch, declare it. Let this be more than a video. Let it be a reset. Thank you for watching, for choosing yourself today, for doing the quiet work most people avoid. I'll see you in the next one. Same energy, same truth. Take care of your peace until tomorrow.